All right, welcome back. This is Mr. Failer. I wanted to talk about Essay 2 today. Just go over the instructions for the essay and make sure that we draw a clear distinction between Essays 2 and Essays 3. Um, if you turn in the same essay for Essay 3, it won't count. Essay 3 is an argumentative essay, so you don't want to do an argumentative essay for Essay 2. So if you're not doing an argumentative essay, then what are you doing in essay two? The best way to think about it is that you're just presenting your research to this point. This is a research project, so you've hopefully started doing your research already. The sooner the better. If you wait until the last minute, the results will not be good because research always takes longer than you think it's going to take. So it's good to do a little bit every day. Uh, schedule a time to research and make sure that you use that time because if you're just waiting and doing it in your spare time, you're not going to get the depth that you need to get in order to develop your topic correctly. So hopefully at this point you have a few really good sources. So what you're going to do for the second essay is essentially what we call an expository. Think of the word exposition. You're just showing what you've done. You're showing what's out there. So think of it maybe as a research report. So you're analyzing the data that's out there. That means you're taking the data that's out there and you're breaking it up into smaller pieces that you can explain and look at. So um, the idea is that you're going to dissect or analyze the issue in essay two. Just talk about what's out there, what are people talking about, and then for essay three, you're going to use this research, and then you're going to build upon it with new research in order to construct an argument. So in essay three, you're actually going to argue for or against something. In essay two, you're just basically saying this is what's out there. So you may wonder, well, how do I organize that then? And the answer is to use one of the modes of analysis that we're looking at in chapter 3. So we have chapters 3.3 through 3.7. So that means I'm looking for one of these: classification, process, definition, comparison and contrast, or cause and effect. Many students sort of fall into a pattern of pros and cons or advantages and disadvantages. I do not want that because pros and cons and advantages and disadvantages, um, it kind of falls under the rubric of compare and contrast, but it misses the point of compare and contrast. If you're comparing and contrasting, you're going a little bit deeper and you're looking for interesting comparisons that aren't readily apparent, or interesting contrasts within your topic that aren't readily apparent. You're not just saying, well, it has a good side and a bad side. That's not what we're doing on this essay. So make sure that you're doing classification, process, definition, or comparison and contrast. That's number one. So apply one of those structures, and it will, a lot of it depends on your research. If you've uh, gathered information and it lends itself to a cause and effect, then you can go ahead and do that. There are multiple causes for a single effect, or there are multiple effects from a singular cause, and the research seems to indicate this. Then you can turn that around in essay three and build an argument based upon that information that you've gathered. Um, so, how many sources then do you need? Well, I want you to have at least one source from at least one scholarly journal. That means you're going to have to go on Galileo and look at some scholarly journals. Um, Depending on what your topic is, you'll look in a different type of journal. So you're looking for studies or research, something official that essentially gives evidence that might be useful to your topic. So let's say you're doing an education topic. Well, there's a lot of educational research out there, educational studies that look at different teaching methods or teaching platforms, and then they compare one group with another group and say which one had better outcomes. There are a lot of psychology and sociology that you could look at where people are doing surveys or they're analyzing data in the research. So you need at least one source from one scholarly journal. If you're not sure if the journal that you're looking at is scholarly enough, just send me an email. Let me know what it is you're looking at, and I can give you feedback. So if you don't have at least one source from at least one scholarly journal, you'll get an MS on your paper, which means missing source. It doesn't matter if you have 5 other sources. If one of them isn't from a scholarly journal, then you'll have points deducted for that. You should also find at least one other authoritative source. That means a source that you can you can basically verify um, who wrote it and verify that they're an expert or that it comes from a place of expertise. Stay away from tertiary sources. These would be reference books like encyclopedias, or sometimes on the internet you'll find lists um, that are put out. And so you can kind of tell that it's just sort of a collection of information that's already out there. You want to track things back to the original source as far as possible when you're doing research. So at least one from a scholarly journal and at least one authoritative source. So that's a minimum of 2 sources. So really for this second essay, you really only have to have 2 sources. Now you're probably going to want to have more than that because it'll help you to meet the length requirement if you have more to talk about. So if your third and fourth sources are a little less authoritative, um, I don't mind. I'm not going to take points off if you include those. But I do want to see these scholarly and authoritative sources. So also the last page of your essay will be a works cited page. So think about the bibliographic citations exercise. So that's where you're going to put bibliographic citations of your sources, and make sure that the sources that you list on your works cited page are the sources that are cited in your essay. So if there's a disconnect, if you have something cited in your essay that's not listed in your works cited page, you'll have points deducted for that. And also, if you have sources on your works cited page that are not cited in your essay, that you'll have points taken off for that. So make sure that those line up. So you're using 8th or ninth edition bibliographic citation. I do have those materials and lectures in the folder, so make sure if you haven't watched those that you watch those and look through those materials. Um, Now, one thing that students do sometimes they really mess up is they'll copy the citation from their source because they say, "Oh, it's already cited. I'll just copy this." Well, you have to be careful because there are many different formats out there. And so you're doing your paper in MLA. You don't know if the format being used in the source is MLA. So you should always just take the time to figure out how to do a bibliographic citation of your source and also an in-text citation of your source. So don't copy from what you're seeing when you're researching. MLA is used more for the humanities, English, history, things like that. But a lot of your research is going to be in the sciences and other areas, so they don't necessarily use MLA. So you're just changing it to MLA. Also, if you're quoting a source within a source, there's a way to do that in MLA. You'd have to say like Smith quoted in Brown or something. So make sure that if you're doing that, you're looking that up so you do it correctly. All right, so I gave you these suggested topics. So I really want you to choose something that's within the umbrella of one of these. Energy technology, so some suggestions could be alternative energy, electric vehicles, nuclear power. Now, we've already done our topic proposals, so I've given you feedback on your topic. And what I've basically told everyone is you always have to do a little bit of narrowing. When you narrow your topic, you find a specific angle. So an example of that would be, let's look at energy technology, that first one there. Um, energy technology is a wide umbrella. So if I wanted to narrow that topic, I might look at alternative energy. If I want to narrow that topic a little more, I might look at solar and wind power. So you can see that we're becoming more specific as we narrow it down. Um, Now, part of the research process is educating yourself about your topic. So a lot of times you can't narrow it down until you've done the research. So use the knowledge and the information that you gain in your research to approach your topic in a more focused and intelligent way. All right, so that will really come through in the way that you organize your essay. So if you have a good narrow topic, then you should be able to generalize about your topic. Why is this an important topic? Are there any contemporary issues right now in the news that speak to your topic? And then you'll narrow it down to your main idea, your thesis statement, your thesis statement should reflect one of the rhetorical modes that you're using. So if you're doing a comparison and contrast, then your main idea or thesis statement should state clearly what it is about your topic that you're comparing and contrasting, for example. So when I read your thesis statement, I should be able to say, they're doing a comparison contrast, or they're doing a classification or a cause and effect. And I'll talk about that later in the presentation in more detail. Now, you do not want to be off topic. So if you're off topic, you're doing a topic that I haven't approved or I told you to change, um, or you're doing one that I told you not to do, like abortion, gun control, marijuana legalization, or school dress codes. I do not want papers on those topics. There are many reasons for that, but I want you to stick with the suggested topics above. If you have any questions about that, just let me know. So the final version of your essay should be at least 1,000 words, not counting the works cited page. So don't misunderstand that. Um, that doesn't mean I don't want a works cited page. It just means I'm not going to count the words in your works cited page. So it'll be 1,000 words in your essay plus whatever's in your works cited page. So that doesn't count towards the word count. It's MLA formatted, so I need 12 point times New Roman. If you submit something under 1,000 words, it will be severely penalized, so you'll lose a lot of points because many teachers won't even take it if it's short. But if you turn in something that's very short, you may end up getting a 40 or a 50 on the essay. So make sure that you are, um, you're doing that correctly. Sorry about all these arrows on your screen. I'm not sure why that happens. There. Um, and then make sure that you're submitting it as a file that you can upload into the Dropbox. So a doc, a Word document, docx works, but not as well. So if you can just do a regular Word document, um, Blackboard, RTF, PDF, a lot of people do Word or PDF files. I prefer that you do Word because sometimes if you upload a PDF file, it may change your spacing or change something. It's very hard to get that perfect. So I would just go ahead and do it as a Word doc. If you're using Apple, you use that Pages format or some other format, usually you can convert your document into a Word document. So if you have any questions about how to do that, make sure that you contact your distance education office. I do not want links. Don't just give me a link. We do have software that checks for plagiarism, so if you just provide a link, it won't check it. All right, so now when I grade this essay, I'm going to be following this rubric, and you can also use this rubric to understand my feedback. So first of all, I'll be looking at your content and your research. Do you have the sources that are required? If you don't, it'll be MS, a missing source. Is it on topic? Um, do you have a clear topic, sentence, or thesis statement? Um, is it weak? WT means it's a weak thesis. MT means it's a missing thesis. Length. Does it meet the length requirement? So those are the 4 things I'll be looking at for content and research. You'll get a maximum of 5 points for that. In-text documentation, I'll be looking at your in-text or parenthetical citation. So take the feedback from your parenthetical citation exercise and make sure that you do your in-text or parenthetical citations correctly. EIC means error in-text citation. MIC means missing in-text citation. And I'll just tell you right now, um, if you don't have any in-text citation, um, that's like 20 points off of your essay. So you you must have in-text citation. That's something that we actually assess for the state. It's one of the most important things in this class is that you learn how to use a format and document correctly. So don't leave that out of your essay. QE means a quotation error. That's going back to the first module when we talked about punctuating quotations and using signal phrases and capitalization correctly. Make sure that you're using the proper punctuation with your parentheses when you do parenthetical citation. I will also look at your works cited, your references page. And this has many facets. One is that your bibliographic citations are alphabetized and they're in hanging indentation. So if you see EHI, that means I saw an error in your hanging indentation. Or if they're not indented at all, if you're not using it at all, that'll be an MHI, and that's a lot of points off. EWC means error work cited. Error works cited means if there's something wrong with your title, your works cited title, or you have spacing issues on the page. So everything has to look good. Everything has to be perfect. And then ENCE is error 9 core elements. So I'm looking at are you following the MLA 8th or 9th edition rules for your 9 core elements? Author, title, container, and so on. Make sure that you are taking hyperlinks out of your URLs. Make sure that you take the protocol information out, like the HTTP. Make sure that you're using italics for container titles and quotation marks for other titles, regular titles, and that everything's in the right order and done the right way. And I show you how to use Galileo to help you do your citations, but you also need to use a reference to clean them up because the computer can only get you about 80% of the way there. You still have to clean it up and make some decisions based upon what kind of a source you're using. All right, and then I'm looking at style and structure. Under style and structure, I'm looking at your MLA page formatting. Is that correct? Do you have a formatted header? Is your line spacing correct? Do you indent your paragraphs? Are you using Times New Roman 12 point? Have you removed extra spacing when you hit return? Um, I'm looking at your unity and coherence. Do you have a strong topic sentence or thesis? And does it line up with the topic sentences in your body paragraphs? Um, and then if you have a missing or underdeveloped section, like if you have a very short introduction, so you barely have an introduction or you barely have a conclusion, that I don't see that you have a strategy for those, then you'll get a UP, which means underdeveloped paragraph. Or if you're missing a section, if you don't have a concluding paragraph or you're missing a body paragraph, then that will be an MP. And then I also look at mechanics. So you want to proofread for a point of view. Point of view is big on this essay because I want you to use third person objective point of view. So don't say I, or me, or you. You want to use he, she, it, they. So stay in the third person. Now, if you're quoting something and that's in the first person or second person, that's fine. But your words, your narrative, you don't want to use first person or second person on this essay. So that's true for essays 2 and 3. All right, so that rubric is there for you as a reminder. You can use it as a checklist so that you can check all of those things. Did I meet the length requirement? Do I have a strong thesis statement? Do I have the sources I need? Is my in-text citation correct? Are my quotes punctuated correctly? Um, do I have hanging indentation, alphabetized on my works cited page? Am I following the rules for 9 core elements? Is my page set up correctly in MLA page formatting? Do my topic sentences of my body paragraphs support my thesis statement in a way that is obvious to the reader? Um, are all of my paragraphs well developed? And did I proofread for grammar and point of view errors? So it's very important to use this rubric as sort of a checklist that will help you. All right, and if you'd like, go ahead and look ahead to the research persuasive essay, which will be our third essay. There will be a few different wrinkles on here. First of all, you don't want to turn in the same essay for essay 3 that you use for essay 2. We do have something that's called a similarity report. It's how we check for plagiarism. Now, if you turn in a paper for essay 2, it's going to trigger that similarity report. Now, I know that some of the things will be similar, but I will tell you that if you have a safe assign originality score of over 70%, then um, I'm not going to accept it. So I do have a setting there where you can check the originality score. And so make sure that you have reformatted and reframed your essay. So start all over with a new outline. You're going to have a different introduction. You're going to have a different thesis statement. You're probably going to have different body paragraphs because each body paragraph will be supporting your thesis statement rather than the main idea from essay 2. So it has to be markedly different, although it is on the same topic. So you can build upon your sources that you've already found in your research, and you're going to be adding additional sources. So for your third essay, you're going to have at least 2 additional authoritative or scholarly sources. So you've already had 2, and now you're going to have 2 additional. So this means there's a minimum of 4, right? And they can be authoritative or scholarly. So if you had 1 scholarly source and 3 authoritative sources, that would be fine. If you had 3 scholarly sources and 1 authoritative source, that would be fine. That would actually be better. But that's the minimum of 4. You're going to add another 500 words to the length, but then pretty much everything else is the same. So if you have questions about, I don't want to make my second essay too similar to my third, you know, the biggest thing that you can do is don't do an argument for your third essay. Just present your research according to one of these rhetorical modes that we're looking at. All right, now next I wanted to go into a little more detail about those rhetorical modes. So if you don't have time to sit through this entire lecture, this might be a good place to pause it and notice the time stamp so that you can open it again at a later time and sort of fast forward to this point. So I'm going to transition here. All right, I have this nice little laser pointer here so it won't leave those cursors all over the place. So this is from the folder 2 analysis essay overview PowerPoint, which is available in the shell. I've rearranged the slides a little bit from a previous demonstration, but you'll see it in one form or the other. All right, so we just went over the requirements for essay 2. You are writing an expository essay, so you're presenting your research. So some questions that you can think of as you're organizing this is, what are people saying about your topic? What is the best information out there? And best means the most current and the most thorough and the most authoritative information. What have you found on all sides of your issue? Remember, you can present both sides of an issue without taking a side. You'll want to take a side in the third essay. Select a method of organization. Make sure that that's clear in your main idea. And that's what I'll show you in this part of the presentation. I'll show you some examples of that. Not pros and cons, and do not write an argument yet. So at least one source from a scholarly journal and at least one more authoritative source for a total of 2. Now you can have tertiary sources, but they will not count towards the minimum number of sources. If you have questions about your sources, make sure and email me. 1,000 words, not counting the works cited. I need a works cited page with bibliographic citation. And I need to see parenthetical citation referencing all sources in the works cited page. All right, so we've talked a little bit already about narration and description as rhetorical modes, and you used those 2 modes when you did your narrative essay. So this is an expository essay, so it's all about exposition. Exposition explains or informs. So this is why we're using classification, process, definition, comparison, contrast, or cause and effect, because these are all rhetorical modes of exposition. Remember to save this 4th mode, persuasion, for essay 3. So you're not trying to persuade me, you're just trying to expose me to the best research that's out there right now. Now, don't let this overcomplicate matters for you, because several modes may be used in a single text. It's just that one of these modes has to be the dominant mode. So let's say I'm doing a cause and effect essay. So basically what I'm showing are that multiple effects can come from a single cause, or there could be multiple causes for a single effect, or some combination of that. But in the process of explaining causes and effects, I might use some process language. I might use some classification, as long as you have an overriding approach. What is the main purpose of your essay? Is it to classify? Is it to define? Is it to contrast? Or is it to show a relationship between cause and effect? So you have to keep that in mind. Now, what we call the rhetorical triangle is kind of interesting because it also applies to your essays. You want a little bit of each of these in your essays for more or less of a degree. Now, in your narrative descriptive essay, you are using more pathos. That means emotion and values, and also maybe some ethos, what gives it credibility. But in your next 2 essays, logos will be very important. Logic and reason. How well reasoned, how well organized are your ideas? Are the conclusions that you're drawing informed by the research that you show? Are you making a good case for why you think the way that you do? Ethos is what gives you credibility as a writer. So you can build credibility and trust with your readers by having strong sources and having good reasoning. But strong sourcing and good formatting on your essay creates ethos. We use that word a lot, ethos, and people use it in a lot of different ways to mean like values and so on. But really, what ethos means is what makes you the real deal, right? What makes you somebody worthy of listening to. So you establish ethos with your tone, with your presentation, and with the strength of your sources and the strength of your ideas. So here's an example of a classification structure here. And I grabbed some of these examples from your textbook. So when you classify, you break a complex subject down into more manageable parts through categories or recognition of common traits. So it's very similar to a comparison kind of a thing. except it's the categories that are what really matter in classification. So if you can find a real novel and interesting way to break down your topic into different categories, um, that would be a good thing for classification. So, um, and what makes a classification essay interesting is that your criteria that you develop are creative and interesting. So you're not just stating the obvious. So here's a topic sentence that shows a classification. In order to better understand the diversity of New York State, it is helpful to break it into these 5 separate regions: Long Island, New York City, Western New York, Central New York, and Northern New York. So if I read that um, topic sentence, I'm going to say, oh, okay, they're doing a classification essay because they've created these categories. And then I expect you to build off of these categories in your body paragraphs. So my first body paragraph might be Long Island and New York City. My second one might be Central and Western New York. If they, the fourth one might be Northern New York. Now you can see how you could create a comparison and contrast out of this if you wanted to. But if you did that, you would have to rework your topic sentence, talking about traits that are similar and different in these different regions of New York. So the same topic, can lend itself to different rhetorical modes. You just have to pick one and make that the focus and make that the organizing principle. This is how I'm organizing it. This is how I'm presenting it. Now, a concluding sentence then should echo the idea in the topic sentence. So a concluding sentence might read, New York is certainly more than its largest city, as the regional differences between Long Island, New York, Central and Western and Northern New York attest. So this one even has the word differences in it. So that might sound a lot like a contrast, but it's okay as a concluding sentence as long as it doesn't contradict anything that you've said so far. All right, process essays, you're focusing on a process. It's directional, it's informative. So it's how to do something or how something works. Um, if you were to write an essay on, let's say that you're interested in nuclear power, you might look at the process of how different types of nuclear power plants work, right? And so you could explain how they work through your research. We use chronological order for a process essay, first, next, finally. So the example from your book, your textbook, choosing the perfect yarn for a knitting project relies on the preferences of the person for whom the project is being made, the availability of the yarn, and the type of yarn called for by the pattern. Now you may say, oh, that sounds like classification. It does. Um, but like I said, a lot of these modes sort of run into each other a little bit. But overall, what this is telling you is how to choose, right? How to choose the perfect yarn. And because you're describing how to do something, this falls under process. So keep that in mind when you organize your body paragraphs. So in your body paragraphs, you want to talk about how the preferences of the person that you're doing the project for, how does that inform your decision? So you know that that's what you need to focus on in that body paragraph. And then the concluding sentence um, is basically a restatement of the topic sentence, just in different words. Next, we have definition. Definition's a little more complicated because what you're doing is you're saying this is how this term is understood, but this is how the term should be understood, right? And you're using research and reasoning in order to make the case. That sounds a little bit like an argumentative, but it's not really argumentative. You're just saying this is how I understand this term. You're not trying to prove it. You're just showing why. All right, so you always want to define the term in its traditional sense, offer a rationale for your enhanced definition. What are you adding? What's special about the definition that you're offering? And remember, don't say I or you. stay in the third person. And break down the content according to different aspects of the definition. So if you do a definition essay, you really need a complex, complicated definition because that's going to form the basis of your essay. So the example from your book, the topic sentence read, the justice system was designed to punish individuals equally for their crimes and then rehabilitate them back into society. However, today's perception of the justice system is that it promotes mass incarceration, which results in a billion-dollar prison industry, unjust mandatory sentencing, and racial and low-income targeting. So this has some elements of cause and effect in it, but overall, what we're doing is we're talking about the perception of the justice system and how people think of the word justice system, what that means to people. And then the rationale is why people think of it that way. So if you're going to organize your body paragraphs, justice as mass incarceration, justice as a billion-dollar prison industry. So you kind of get the point. So you're framing the definition in a certain way and then explaining why it's understood that way. Um, all right. So, and then I say something about perceptions in the concluding sentence. Certainly, one's perception of what justice system denotes is contingent on one's relationship to incarceration, the prison industry, and one's experience in sentencing. So these ideas are basically the same as the ideas in the topic sentence. So that's a good for your concluding paragraph. All right, and then probably the easiest one to do is comparison and contrast because you're just looking at similarities and differences between things that you find in your research. It can be a bit deceptive because you can easily fall into a pros and cons. So, but what you have to do is look at your research carefully, analyze your research, and look for things that are different or the same. And those differences or similarities can be in people's approach, in the way that it's discussed. So it doesn't have to be concrete things that are the same and different. It just depends on what you notice in your research. So you want to choose something that is meaningful, multidimensional, and appropriate. That means you don't want to be too simple. If your topic is too simple, you're going to run out of things to talk about very quickly. Now, do not state the obvious. Instead, find subtle and unexpected similarities and differences. So go past the surface. Show that you've looked at your research carefully and you've read it thoroughly and you understand it. So look for those unexpected or unknown comparisons and contrasts, like the little known things. The example in your book, although the framework of the Batman story has remained the same, the characterization of Batman and his associates differs between various time periods in the evolution of comics. So, what we're doing here is we're talking about something that has remained the same, the framework of the Batman story. But what's different is the characterization that occurs um, between various periods in the evolution of comics. So we have something that's similar, we have something that's different. Now, in your book, you'll notice that if you have a comparison and contrast essay, that you can go two ways. You can talk all about the similar things first. You can talk about all the differences in the second section, or you can spread it out and do similarity difference, similarity difference, similarity difference. So one is like a block style, the other is a point by point. So it just depends on what does your information allow you to do. If everything lines up perfectly, that there's a similarity and a differences, and a similarity and a difference for each point, that's great. You can do point by point. If you have a few similarities and a lot of differences, then you might want to do block. All right, so make sure that you read through those chapters to get an idea. Um, the essay will not write itself, and it's not going to come out of thin air. It's not a magical process, but it is a process that if you follow the steps and you apply the rhetorical modes and you develop your ideas little by little, and learn more about your topic, the ideas will present themselves to you, and then all you have to do is organize them and present them. So trust the process and do the work. If you don't, it's going to be a lot harder at the end of the day just to kind of pull something out of thin air based upon very little authentic knowledge about your topic. All right, so that's about all I have for this presentation. So I hope this helps put some of the readings into context and helps you to understand the task that you have for this essay so that you can be efficient and know exactly what it is that you're supposed to be doing. If you have any questions, as usual, please send me an email. If we have to schedule a virtual session, we can do that.